You can see YouTube on YouTube. We have a procedure we have to take place to make sure it's streaming on YouTube and allow Ally to see live comments if needed. So please bear with us as we make sure we adhere to the rules.
Okay, one watching.
Okay. So I'd like to call the public hearing to order. We have a procedure we have to take place to make sure. You just got to mute that. There's always a delay. Allow Ally to see live comments if needed. Please. Oh. Okay. Hopefully the feedback stopped. Technology. So I'll call the public hearing to order at 4:33. Ally, would you please read the announcement?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing pursuant to Article 18-A of the New York State General Municipal Law will be held by the counties of Warren and Washington Industrial Development Agency on the 23rd of May, 2022 at 4:30 p.m. local time via Zoom at the meeting information below in accordance with legislation S 7623A/A.8591, amending Chapter 417 of the laws of 2021, or in accordance with legislation S 8006C/A 9006C, Part WW, Chapter 56 of the laws of 2022, as the case may be, in connection with the following matter at Zoom information. 7880 Main Street, LLC, a limited liability company established pursuant to the laws of the state of New York, having an address of 9 Mountainside Drive, Queensbury, New York, has requested that the agency provide financial assistance in the form of a partial real property tax abatement, a mortgage recording tax abatement, and a sales tax abatement regarding a certain commercial project to consist of the acquisition by the agency of a leasehold interest in certain real properties located at 78 Main Street and 80 Main Street in the town of Queensbury, County of Warren, New York, and being known as tax map parcel numbers 309.10-1-24 and 309.10-1-25. The planning, design, and construction, operation, and maintenance by the company of approximately a 12,000 plus or minus square foot facility, which will be used by the company for a mixed-use facility that will consist of retail and residential space. The acquisition of an installation in and around the land and improvements by the company of machinery, equipment, fixtures, and other items of tangible personal property, and entering into a straight lease transaction pursuant to which the agency will retain a leasehold interest in the facility for a period of time and sublease such interest in the facility back to the company, all pursuant to Title I of Article 18-A of the General Municipal Law of the State of New York, Chapter 862 of the laws of 1971 of the State of New York as amended. The agency may be providing financial assistance with respect to the project in the form of sales tax exemptions related to the construction and equipping of the project facility, a mortgage recording tax exemption on qualifying mortgages, and a payment in lieu of taxes which are consistent with the policies of the agency. Should other financial assistance be requested, it shall be consistent with the policies of the agency. A representative of the agency will be in attendance at the above stated time and place to hear and accept written comments from all persons with views in favor of or opposed to the granting of financial assistance contemplated by the agency or the location or nature of the facility. The application of the company is available for public inspection during normal business hours at the offices of the agency located at 5 Warren Street, Glens Falls, New York, 12801. Minutes of the hearing will be made available to all necessary parties.
Thank you, Ally. So let me just lay out what process we're going to take today in terms of the public meeting. We'll ask Joe Lucy or his attorney Jeff Myers to give us an overview of the project, including what their plans are, why they feel they need assistance in the form of the sales tax abatement, pilot and mortgage tax, I'm sorry. We also will set a little bit of time. There's a finding statement which we prepared that Mr. Ostrander can look through or can sort of brief through. It's available. It will be available online. So with that in mind, Joe or Jeff, I'm not who the spokesman is going to be. Could you please talk about the project, what the need is, where you see the need, where you want to fit, and why, in terms of assistance, you're looking for that assistance from the IDA.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess for the record, my name is Jeff Meyer. I'm an attorney with Meyer, Fuller, and Stockwell up in Lake George. I represent Foothills Builders, LLC, and the newly formed 78-80 Main Street, LLC, which is going to be the holding company that'll own the real property. Lucci Property Management is probably the one that's going to ultimately manage the rental of the facility if everything goes through. The kind of for a brief history and to kind of piggyback on the information in the application. My client purchased a property located at 78 Main Street in the town of Queensbury. It's more or less across the street from our kitty corner to the new Adirondack Trust building on off exit 18. The intention is to essentially fulfill Queensbury's vision for that Main Street corridor, have a forward-facing mixed-use building with more or less zero setback against the road. There is going to be parking in the rear of the building to make it easier for the residents and those visiting the facility. The first floor, which is kind of approximately 8,500, 8,600 square feet, would be used for offices, retail, essentially whatever tenants make themselves available to Foothills Builders and Lucci Property Management. At a minimum, it will probably house Foothills Builders as a showroom and office for their residential construction business, which are developing in and around Queensbury. The upper second and third floor will be is hopefully going to be residential apartments, 1 to 2 bedrooms. The plan right now is showing, I believe, 22. It is on the agenda this week for site plan review and approval, hopefully, with the town of Queensbury. The need for the facility, or for the request for the tax abatements, sales, mortgage, and pilot, is a reflection of rising costs, both for raw materials and labor. It has become a difficult building market, even though there is high demand. But the high demand, the prices needed to make things affordable has outpaced construction costs. So in an effort to try and keep things in line and be able to offer a single bedroom apartment for $1,300, which is certainly not affordable housing by definition, but it's reasonable and in line with demand. The only way to make those numbers truly work is to receive some kind of abatements, which is why we're asking for assistance. That is kind of the brief overview. I don't know if Joe wants to add anything, or if there are any questions from the agency yet.
I just wanted to ask one question before Joe jumps on. If any one of you, either of you, have any information on what would impact, I mean, you're targeting to 1,300 for 1 bedroom. What's the impact if you don't get assistance?
Joe?
We're actually, I think Jeff might have misspoke. We're looking more in the probably $1,100 to $1,200 range for the 1 bedrooms. Without assistance, it would be tough to meet those numbers in terms of feasibility of the project. And, we kind of see those rental numbers creep up a little higher than where they are, which kind of gets it really towards the top end of the market, which we were trying to stay, at or below and not exceed.
Thanks, Joe. You had other comments, Joe? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say thanks to Jeff, and that was a very comprehensive rundown of the project. So I didn't really have much to add beyond what he said. So
One of the things I think that people be interested in is why pick that location, and where do you think you're going to attract housing for?
we like the location because of its proximity to the Northway and downtown Glens Falls. That corridor in general can kind of draw people working in Glens Falls and also draw people who are commuting. Saratoga County has a lot of jobs to offer. I think everyone saw what Global Foundries is doing down there right now. I think they're purchasing some more land, but being able to keep the people living in Queensbury and in Warren County kind of keeps them spending the money that they earn in that area. So I think that's a good spot because of access to both the Northway and Glens Falls.
I'd add that it would be reasonable to assume that folks working, essentially shift workers in Lake George, especially in the summer, this would be easy access to them, and the northern southern parts of Warren County, for lack of a proper descriptor. Once you really kind of get north of Glens Falls, there aren't a lot of apartments for rent for the type of it's not seasonal employment, but there's a lot of kind of hourly workers in Lake George with no housing to speak of, because everything's going to short-term rentals and vacation rentals, which this wouldn't be subject to.
Okay. Mike, would you give a brief overview of the finding statement?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the board and the participants. In our finding statement, a lot of what has already been mentioned is some of the points that we, as the IDA, pointed out as positives to support the project. Foothills Builders is requesting property tax incentives in the form of a pilot. The application, in comparing the application to the IDA's UTAP policies, it would best be served under our mixed use abatement structure. Once the subsequent tax incentives are calculated against the assessed value, it would start at the 50% at the first year and be reduced 5% each year until year 11. Foothills Builders is also requesting sales tax abatement, which we calculated at approximately $105,000 to include appliances in the apartments on the second and third floor. And then last, they are requesting mortgage tax abatement on their financing loan of $2.75 million. It's an approximate savings of a little over $34,000. We found some of the same issues that were brought up as well. The purpose of the mixed use facility would serve both downtown Glens Falls, its proximity to the Northway. Some of the employers that could benefit from people in this mixed use facility would include employees at Glens Falls Hospital and some of the retail shops in and around Main Street. The commercial property is a high visibility spot in Queensbury. There's a lot of traffic up and down Main Street, so it would be very sought after property outside of Lucy and Foothills Builders occupying the first floor. And finally, as previously mentioned, there's 2 points I'll make in the application. They are anticipating creating up to 20 jobs 2 years, up to 2 years after the project. And as mentioned, the project potentially could be tabled or even delayed if the IDA doesn't approve the application for the tax abatement savings due to the ongoing construction costs.
And I always like to ask the applicant, is that a true statement? In other words, what would happen if you didn't get the financial incentives?
I think we'd have to look at, holding off until the market settled down to, a more reasonable position. Materials keep going up every single day, and it almost feels like a recession is the only thing that's going to stop them from doing that. So we would have to probably, rethink our plan.
Okay. So it's open up to public comment. So I was going to conduct our other business while we wait. I was going to leave the public hearing open for a while for people who may have gotten the wrong time or order. So, but we don't have a quorum yet, so I can't do that. I will cover some of the things I want to. First of all, we weren't looking at doing the project approval tonight. We're looking for public comment on it. Looked at it. I did send out a PTO policy to look at and review. Hopefully that you've had a chance to do it. Video conference resolution. Can't set the public hearing date. Review a new UTEP. I will say that. I will look at it. I like everyone to start looking at it and looking at the changes we're proposing. We're trying to modernize UTEP and get more applicable to the current marketplace. Our other tax abatement policy is about 30 years old and hasn't received any major refresh in a while. We're changing some things, and I think that what we're looking at, and I'll give you the highlights just to fill in some time here so that we can allow time for public comment. The first is that we are looking at a little change in structure in terms of that. We think it's important that when a project applicant comes to us, is that we get more information to the affected the towns to look at. We're going to be asking them to join us in meetings when the potential applicant comes in for their initial meeting with the IDA. We think that's important. We think it's important that we bring in above, because I think people really need to understand what the reasons are and why the reasons are there. So that's one of the biggest changes we're making. We are making sure that we are adjusting some of our process to make sure that we are getting a better feel for the project in the town in terms of potential assessed value. I think this one's a good case in point, is that normally when we look at a project, we're looking at it and seeing that what the old assessed value was. I think we need to look more in terms of this case, especially since it merged properties and change in use. We're using what the assessed value that the assessor thinks it will be when she does that, or not she, but they think. I didn't mean to imply that all assessors were women, but sorry, I didn't mean that. But anyhow, get their input. I think that's important in these days. But I also think that the impact on organizations, especially in this time frame, we need housing for different levels of people. And that isn't just in Queensbury or Glens Falls, it's all over Warren and Washington County. Just the impact is there. And I think that we're finding more and more, especially in the outlier, in the northern regions of Warren County, there's that case. I've heard that from a number of people. And I think that we need to look at what economics is coming from people. Some of the other changes we're making is expanding, potentially expanding where we look at assistance in terms of better defining our mixed use policy and our PUD policy and everything else like that. We're looking at expanding that. So I think you need to review that and review the process. We're actually pulling the UTEP out of our policy manual and make his own standalone, which it really should have been all along, but that's one of the enhancements we're looking at. So hopefully that policy will be a good upgrade and a better reflection of the times. One thing that people looked at was that, you know, if we look at what was 30 and 40 years ago, you know, the imagination was that, gee, he was going to come here and relocate and bring 300-400 jobs here. That's not the reality of the environment anymore. That's not the reality. A company that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, even in manufacturing, who may employ 300-400 people with the new methods of production, all the tools, number one, the types of people they were looking to hire may change, but the number of people based on technology, based on everything else, really changes. So we want to reflect that. We certainly, this is for any place in New York State, we need to make sure we're being competitive. I think it's important to remember that if we look at companies that are evaluating this area, and WL Plastics is a great example, they had 6 locations they were looking at. And while it was unfortunate that because of the COVID situation, he couldn't do that, couldn't come here, I think it's important to remember that what other communities are giving them in terms of pilots, in terms of enhancements, in some cases were much greater than we could even afford. And I always use the case of Fulton County, is that they had land they owned for 40 years down there. The IDA owned for 40 years. They actually gave that land to a warehousing organization that put in 1 million square foot of warehousing space. And I viewed that as really a fantastic facility, but the jobs it brought, the enhanced value it brought, and even upgrading it, they donated land and they gave a pilot that I would never even consider doing. So I think we need to reflect what's really happening out there. So I appreciate it doing. We will cover that. I'd like to get that underway. We've been kicking the can down the road for a while, but now it's time to bite the bullet and get this done, because that's also going to reflect a change in our overall policy manual. So just talking. So have anyone thought of any of the questions they'd like to comment on or talk about?
Mr. Chairman, is that a general open question or is that for the 7880?
Well, I certainly want to have input on that, but I was also directing towards public comment for the public hearing. Open mic, I guess.
Yeah. Would this be appropriate time for a board member to talk about assessment of the property, or is that taken up under the discussion of the board?
Assessment of the property?
Yeah.
It's open mic.
Because you had mentioned it is 2 parcels that total $245,000 together. Is there, when parcels are combined and such, would there be any differences in assessed value, et cetera, et cetera? You know, do we go by what's on the books as of today?
No, that's what Terry talked about in terms of what she thought the assessment would be when they were merged. Terry, yourself.
Yeah, because I just took that off of Warren County GIS there, off the parcel viewer. So
no, this is what input from Terry.
Thank you very much for doing or thinking about redoing your policy about that. You know, in this day and age, a lot of towns are, including Queensberry, are doing very much more frequent updates. And for me to say that an assessment today is going to be what's going to be for next March 1st, which is how we value property as of March 1st, is kind of this is a good idea that you don't put the base amount in your application and all your paperwork. Again, we update. I'm probably going to be updating in for this next year with the market the way it is. So I think that's very smart to include, you know, possible changes in assessment.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably one of the most misunderstood parts is what the base value is people are taking an assumption that it's not going to change. Well, I can give you several examples is that there's a property I sell that's got an ag exemption on it. And I'm not an assessor, Terry, so please forgive my mistake. But there's not it was going from different use, so it's going from ag to commercial. Automatically, there is an increase. I won't say automatically, there's potentially good increase in what the base property is. So I think we have to keep that in mind, use of the property changes. And that's very important. I think that reflection is very good to do. It could be a case where it go from residential to commercial. I know that if I look at some property that we had reassessed over in Fort Edward, that residential is assessed at, my memory serves me, $4,000 an acre. And some industrial is now assessed at 40,000. That was from an acre. That was from a professional appraisal. So that's quite a difference in it. I think we need to take that in consideration. Hopefully the differences aren't that dramatic, but we have, you know, that's one thing we're looking at. So.
And if I could get into the weeds a little bit, where does equalization rate come into this?
The equalization rate really doesn't come into valuing the property. The equalization rate is something that the state sets every year. And what they do is they look at all the sales in the town, and then they look at those corresponding assessments, and it's a ratio. In fact, Queensberry has been at 100% since 2015. We value things the same way, but then the state looks at the assessments and then does the ratio. Now this year we're only going to be at 90%, and I'm predicting that if we don't do an update next year, we'll be in the 70% range with the way the market is right now. So so I guess what I would say is, if you were it doesn't change the way we assess, but we wouldn't put something. We have to look at what the equalization rate is going to be, and to make it fair, you know, new properties coming online, we would value it at 90% of what we thought the value would be.
Okay.
No, my jewel of Washington County of Hampton, we did a reassessment last year with 100%. This year we're at 95%. That just reflects the change in the marketplace. But the assessor looked at it and says, I'm not sure what's going to happen next year, so I don't want to change it because it could go the other way. And instead of being at 95%, we could be at 105%. It's just the market's so wild, and the impact on housing and properties, especially residential, is really unknown at this time. And, you know, especially when mortgage rates are going up substantially. You got some people lucky enough to pay cash. You don't worry about the mortgage, but the lion's share of people looking at more increases in interest, and any banker can say this, is that, you know, we don't know where it's going to be, but right now it's going up and people are rethinking because the affordability index for housing is changing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I need to ask, is there anyone else have comments on the public hearing? Asking a second time, is there anybody else who has comments on the public hearing? And saying it a third time, is there anyone else who has comments on the public hearing? Having asked three times and heard none, we'll close the public hearing. I would request the board members and interested parties, especially Tim, who is the CFO, stay for attorney-client privilege discussion. So thank you all for attending. We appreciate it.